Well, thank you everyone for coming today. My name is Kim Raymond, and I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist at Community Hospice and Health Services. So today we're focusing on grief. And did I see on your badge you're a hospital chaplain?
Yes.
Awesome. Okay.
I was chaplain at Community Hospice for 4 years as well.
Oh.
At Alexander Hospice House.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Okay. Well, at any point, I like to keep it very relaxed. If you guys, have any thoughts, any questions, please feel free to jump in. I like to make it more conversational. Okay. Are you my clicker?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So I really love this quote. Grief is the form that love takes after someone you love dies. The point isn't to put these feelings behind you altogether. I really emphasize that.
Oh my gosh. I'm sorry.
Oh, that's okay.
I was just trying to hide that.
That's not possible or even desirable. The point is to gain perspective and help grief find its rightful place in a person's life. So I tend to really emphasize and sum this up. Grief is really about learning to live with the love that person has left behind, because that never goes away. That always stays with us. Okay. So, there's lots of ideas around grief, and we frequently hear just give it time, give it time. It's this big emphasis on time. And that suddenly one day, we're going to be done. Almost like it's this task that you accomplish, and then once you hit it, you kind of box it up and put it on a shelf and, done deal. And that's not how grief works at all. And it creates a lot of this false belief, a lot of distress, because I'll have people say, well, it's been 6 months, or there's a big thing around the 1 year mark. It's been a year, but I'm still having tough moments, and they feel like, I'm supposed to be doing better by now. And it's just completely inaccurate. And so it gets described as a journey, because the reality is that you're always going to miss your loved one. That's not something that goes away. Not to sound doom and gloom, though. Grief does change, though. So the hard moments don't happen as often. The way you even feel about things changes. So, maybe initially talking about even happy memories or seeing a picture can be very painful, but as time goes along, sometimes you start to feel this transition of it's painful, but yet it's also heartwarming. And then maybe it does completely full circle turn into, I love looking at these pictures. I love talking about this person. So I think it's just really important to keep in mind that as humans, we're complex, and very few things in life are black and white. There's a lot of gray in between. So just being really open-minded to the idea that grief isn't this fixed state where you're going to experience it for a certain amount of time, and then that'll be it. Couple notes I'll hit on. We can experience it pretty much across the board, emotionally, mentally, physically, spiritually. The point that it states it's natural and expected. I'm going to talk a little bit more about that in a minute, but grief is part of the human experience. It's something that we are literally wired to experience. Kind of as I mentioned, I'm going to kind of expand on some of these things more, but it doesn't occur in stages. There's no time limits. Feelings of grief can come and go when least expected. I've had so many people say, I just went grocery shopping and I happened to see, the type of mascara she used, or, their favorite fruit. And next thing I know, I'm in tears, or I just feel like I wasn't expecting to be triggered by going grocery shopping. So, there's times where you can anticipate it, especially when you're hitting on anniversaries or traditions, holidays, things like that. But it's also really normal for it to feel like it kind of creeps up on you sometimes. Okay. So, how it can affect you, like I said, this is just a snapshot of some of these symptoms that people will experience with grief and loss. And the thing I really want to talk about here is the word depression gets used a lot when we're talking about grief. It's like those two words get used interchangeably. And the fact is, in a minute when we get into talking about the stages of grief, it's even the name of one of the stages. But it's really important to keep in mind that grief and depression are not the same thing. They are two completely separate worlds. It's easy to confuse them, though, because with depression and grief, you can get similar symptoms like, hard time falling asleep and staying asleep, poor concentration, a decrease in your appetite, or finding that you're emotionally eating. Just having a lack of desire to, do things that you would normally enjoy doing. So, it's like when you get that crossover, it can feel like, well, aren't they the same thing? So some kind of key points that really separate grief from depression is I come back to grief is part of the human experience. It's something we're all wired to experience. It's something that you can normally pinpoint your sadness to. I know I'm sad because of this. It has an identifiable trigger. The other thing is grief is temporary in that it can kind of come and go, where it allows you to still have moments of joy or peace, relaxation, whatever it might be. It's, not this 24 hours, 7 days a week. So those are some of the highlights on grief, whereas like a true clinical depression, that is not part of the normal human experience. It's not something that everyone goes through. With depression, it's like putting on a pair of colored glasses that completely changes how you experience life and your perspective, and you never take them off. It impacts everything from your cognitively, emotionally, behaviorally, spiritually. It hits across the board. And another big thing is it's constant. You don't get those moments of relief. And sometimes you don't even know why you feel depressed or what triggered it. You just know that I just suddenly have been feeling really down for quite a while, and it's just something that's always there. And the other key thing with like a true clinical depression is it's causing an impairment. It's causing problems in your day-to-day living. Now, yes, especially in general, when a loss first happens, it can feel like this has completely rocked my world. This is impairing my ability to function day to day. So again, the gray. But when I'm missing work, I'm not able to get up and take care of the things that I need to take care of, including caring for myself each day. I'm completely isolating myself, and this is going on and on and on and on and on. We're getting to that extreme. That's when we're looking at more of clinical depression. So just again, some other additional grief reactions. And keep in mind, we can experience grief in a variety of ways. So it's not always death, loss, or human loss. It's very natural when our furry friends pass away. It can be very significant to us. But even things like divorce, If you have a best friend or maybe a family member who you're really close to and they move away where you don't get to see them the way you used to. If a friendship ends, all of those types of situations can cause a grief reaction. When kids have grown and are leaving the nest, or when you've decided we're done having babies, I'm never going to be pregnant again, or all those things that we view as milestones. It's normal to also have some sort of grief response. And it's really important that you keep in mind that not only does the grief response vary from person to person, but it also tends to vary from experience to experience. So, again, I've heard people say, when my grandma died, I was just, I cried a lot, I had a lot of tears, and now I've just lost my husband, and I haven't cried once yet. And then they judge themselves, what's going on? Am I not feeling? Is there something wrong? Because they have this idea of this is what grief is supposed to look like, and because I responded in this manner this prior time, it's carrying this expectation that it's going to look the same now. Again, the type of relationship, life experiences, things like that very much play a role in influencing grief response. Okay. All right. Okay, so if you were to do a Google search nowadays on the stages of grief, you're going to see 7 stages of grief, 8 stages of grief. There's a variety now. When most people think of the 5 stages of grief, this is kind of the core that was developed. And I'm going to go into talking about each of them, but something to keep in mind is, yes, we are going to talk about them kind of in an order, but the reality is not everyone experiences all these stages of grief, and they don't necessarily go in a particular order. You might feel like, oh, I never hit one, or maybe it bounces around where you feel like, okay, I felt like I got to a place of acceptance, and then all of a sudden I feel like I'm angry again. Really, really keep in mind that the way that you need to move through the grief process is going to naturally unfold as it needs to for you. And so don't compare it to someone else. Okay. Thank you, ma'am. Mm-hmm. So the first one, denial. I really prefer to call it shock. I feel like that better captures what's really going on. And the reality is whether we have what we call an anticipated grief loss, a loved one has stage 4 cancer, we know that, they've tried treatment, or maybe treatment isn't an option. We know that time is limited. Or if it's an unexpected loss and all of a sudden, a tragic car accident, whatever it might be, regardless of the circumstances, there's always some element of shock. I tend to find when it's an unexpected loss, in general, the shock tends to kind of stick around a little bit longer, which I think is understandable. So it's pretty amazing what the human brain does and just how much our survival part of the brain is at play and how much we are functioning day to day out of that part of our brain. So if we were to truly to feel everything that we felt when a loss occurred, we'd be completely flooded. It would be way too much for our brain and our body to take in. To say it's overwhelming would be the tip of the iceberg. So what our brain does is to protect us, it puts us in this state of shock, because at the end of the day, the survival part of your brain is constantly thinking, keep human alive. And so not only does it want to keep you physically safe, it wants to keep you emotionally safe. Any sort of threat, and a threat can be a stressor, which can be grief. So our brain puts us into this state of shock so that as time goes on, we can start to kind of slowly absorb it piece by piece so that we don't just suddenly get hit with this wave of, I am 100% overwhelmed and I cannot tolerate this level of distress. So, in this stage, this is where you get a lot of the feeling of, is this real? Did that really happen? Kind of maybe waking up in the morning or as you're moving about your day, and then just like having these little moments of like, wait a minute. And like, remembering and just feeling like you're in this surreal state of like, things just feel really off right now. Okay, yeah, I think I hit on most of that. So at the bottom, as you accept the reality of the loss and start asking yourself questions, you are really beginning that healing process. So again, I come back to, it's not a matter of time that heals grief. If you are avoiding, acknowledging and allowing your feelings and experience room to exist, time's not going to do anything. It's time and allowing yourself to move through the grief process. Very important combination is how you see it change. Any questions or thoughts so far? Taking it in. All right.
One of the things that practices that I do, I personally hate to use the word loss. Usually in our culture, say sorry for your loss. Loss is a very negative and strong, powerful thing that, okay, so I'm a loser, I lost, and so you can't gain again. I usually use the word missing. For instance, it has happened to me at home when I cannot find my keys or my glasses.
Yeah.
All the time. It all happens to you all, right? So I don't use in that case, I lost my glasses, but I say I can't find it. I don't see it. So I usually, when my clients, I use this term that we may not see them, but we haven't lost them because they are part of them. They are with us, and although they took part of us with them, but let's help each other to find them, not physically, but their memories, their everything that positive that they bring us. So. Back to what you mentioned about a shock is that when you think that it's a loss, it's a losing, it's a little bit more triggers and more nurtures and fuels the thing that did I lose it or
right.
But when you look at it from like if I don't see it, it doesn't mean I lost it. I'm missing it. Mm-hmm. So I'm trying to keep working on it and looking for something.
Yeah.
So I usually go this approach. Yeah.
No, I love that. Thank you so much for sharing that because, you hit on a really important point of language is powerful. Yeah. And so the way something is phrased, even just one specific word can be such a game changer in how someone perceives, experiences, takes in that exchange that you're having with them. So yeah, I will, when I'm working with clients, I'll tend to talk about, well, that person is no longer physically here, but there are still ways to continue to feel connected. And I feel like that, kind of on the same page as you, it's not like this person has completely vanished from our lives, from our hearts. It's changed. It's a different reality. It's a different type of relationship that we now have with them. Yeah. Okay, anger. So, again, in general, I'm going to say that a lot because it's so different for each person. But in general, anger tends to be one of the first emotions that we experience. We can find that sometimes it feels like, okay, I know specifically what I'm angry about. Maybe I'm angry at the person who passed. Maybe I'm, angry at the caregivers, the doctors, the higher power, whoever it might be. And sometimes it can just feel like I'm angry and I'm just kind of spouting off at everyone, just kind of, biting heads off right now, regardless of who it is. So it can be a variety of things. With anger can come feelings of resentment, and some feelings of guilt can also start to emerge a bit. With anger, I really like to acknowledge that with anger, it can sometimes make us feel powerful and or in control. In general, in U.S. culture, anger tends to be a more accepted emotion to show, especially if you're male. And it can make us feel not quite as vulnerable compared to feeling like sad or scared. And so that's why it can also be an easier, per se, emotion to let out, to acknowledge and feel. Which is one of the reasons why it's sometimes one of the first ones we start to see and experience.
Yep.
Okay. The bargaining stage. This one, I say, this is the one that feels like it can kind of eat you alive from the inside out. So this is all of the what ifs, should have, could have, would have statements really start to come out. And this is where there starts to be a reflection on my relationship with that person. Again, it can definitely include a focus on more recent, maybe if there was a long period of health, whether it was an emergency crisis situation, but also reflecting back on kind of the history of the relationship, any, ups and downs, again, we're human, that we've had in that relationship. And so guilt and even sometimes shame, which is two very different things, which I'm just going to hit on real quickly. Guilt is about behavior. So example, it's I did something wrong. Shame is more lethal. Shame is personalized. It's I am something negative. It's where you personalize, you take it in, absorb it, make it part of your character. So this is kind of I'd say a vulnerable stage for things like that to come up, which can make it very, very trying because again, the shock is, I'm not going to say 100% worn off, but you really have moved out of a shock. You're really starting to be able to take in and absorb the reality of the loss. You're moving in that direction. Okay, like I was saying, that keyword, that depression. So this is the stage where you feel like, okay, I really have absorbed and feeling the reality of this person no longer physically being here. And so with that, the sadness that comes with that really can start to set in. Because again, when you think about it, when a loss first happens, again, depending on the relationship, You can get caught up in a lot of, I say, the grief busy work. You know, your planning a celebration of life, funeral services, trying to, again, take care of finances, or, you know, you're in go mode. And sometimes it's not until you've kind of have gone through all that and you feel like you see everyone else kind of moving on with life as usual, and you're like, okay, my brain finally now has a minute to just kind of think. It's not being preoccupied anymore, and to really take it in. So again, this is really about I'm feeling the loss, and my feelings that come with that. All right. Okay, so this last phase, acceptance. You know, it's about recognizing that our loved one is physically gone, and this is, you know, our new permanent reality. Is I've accepted that I'm living life in a new way with that person no longer physically being here. They've allowed themselves to, again, go through the roller coaster of thoughts, feelings that come with grief, allow them room to exist. And a key thing is, though, when you get to acceptance, it doesn't mean that you don't feel sad anymore. Because, again, grief isn't a task where it's like, okay, I'm going to go through it, and then when I'm done, you know, I won't be sad anymore. I'm going to move on with life as usual. You know? But it's about, okay, by acceptance, I feel like I kind of have found my footing again. You know, you're doing things where you've started to figure out whether it's a new daily routine, what are some sources of comfort, what are some lines of connection, which we're going to talk about in a couple of minutes here. But just kind of creating, either tweaking, modifying, creating, whatever it might be, those changes to living life without that person physically present. Okay. So kind of as I've been talking about, we never get over a loss. It's learning to live with the love they left behind and with our new reality. Again, it's not just time heals everything. Grief takes work, and it's hard because it's painful, and it's natural as humans to want to avoid painful things. But the reality is whether it's, you know, a feeling or a thought or like a song that gets stuck in your head and you're like, oh, you know, stop singing that song or stop thinking about this. The more you try to tell yourself, don't think about it, don't go there, ignore it, not only does it stick around, but normally it comes on stronger. So the way you move through feelings is finding ways to allow them to exist. I say feelings are like visitors. They come and go. Some stick around longer than others, but it's not a forever state, including happiness, right? It's just riding the waves. Things are going to come and go. Again, do not compare your grief to others. You're going to get yourself in a harmful trap, okay? There is no right or wrong way to grieve. Some people are naturally more, I say, external in showing their emotion, whereas other people are more internal. So just because you don't feel like you're showing it or other people are seeing it doesn't mean that you're not feeling it or that it's there. The brain processes information differently, whether we read it, write it, say it, draw it. I'm going to talk more about that in a minute. So again, it's listening to your gut and taking peace and knowing I'm doing what's right for me. Being mindful of not isolating yourself. I think there's a balance with grief of, again, in general, there's a tendency when a loss first happens, you get a lot of phone calls, a lot of text messages, people stopping by. But, especially after maybe a funeral's happened, a celebration of life, people kind of tend to go about their life as usual, and you kind of see that fade off. But it is important that you're not just constantly distracting yourself or feeling like, okay, well, I gotta stay active or I gotta stay social. There's a balance. Again, it's not one extreme or the other. It is going to be important when it feels right to you to take moments and a day to, I just need to have an alone day. There's nothing wrong with that. So again, how we grieve is strongly influenced by culture, spirituality, experiences as well. So I always like to talk with clients about, what was, just to kind of get an idea, what was your first grief experience? Did you have one as a child? What did you see from the adults in your life? What was being modeled for you? Because again, that is significant, whether it was healthy, unhealthy, something in between. But keeping that in perspective of kind of what are the spoken or maybe unspoken rules or expectations that might exist within a culture, a family unit, whatever that might be, for how you feel you're supposed to think, feel, behave. Because, again, that can have a strong influence on how you move through your grief journey. Okay. Okay, so, again, I've kind of been touching on this, but, sometimes people will, make comments, and 9 times out of 10, these comments are stated to us with positive intent. But sometimes they end up being hurtful comments or just kind of awkward or weird. And so sometimes something that comes up that I've found will kind of throw someone for a loop or kind of make them question themselves and how they're doing is, someone might say like, oh, you're doing so well when my spouse died, I couldn't stop crying, I couldn't eat, I couldn't do anything, and, look at you, you're doing awesome. And it's intended as a compliment, but oftentimes that's not how it's received. Or even hearing other comments like, oh, they're in a better place now. It's stated with positive intent, but it doesn't always fit right with us, right? Sometimes the things that people say can even make us angry. And so keeping in mind that the way people respond to us when we're grieving is also highly influenced by what's currently going on in their life, what have been their grief experiences, what's their comfort level and maybe cultural beliefs on showing emotion. Another thing, again, in general in U.S. culture is we have a tendency, it's positive intent, but we have a tendency to want to just fix it. Oh, you're sad? Okay, well, let me say something or do something to try and fix it, to try and change it. And sometimes that's really hard for people to just, I'm super uncomfortable to just sit here in this sadness with you. So I got to do something to make it more comfortable for me. Everyone's kind of tolerance level can really vary. So food for thought. Okay, so again, we hear a lot about self-care, and that definitely comes up with grief. But just I kind of want to hit on this in a little bit more specific way. Yes, when we think about self-care, we want to think about all the different components to ourselves that we want to look at. So, again, being mindful of sleep. Sleep can definitely have a big impact on mood and well-being. Eating, again, when we're going through a hard time, sometimes people tend to go to one extreme or the other, where either they completely lose their appetite and they're not eating, or they're overeating because they're emotional eating. So being aware of, I have going for a walk, playing a sport, just doing something that gets your body moving, or even just kind of gets you some nature exposure. I don't know if you guys have heard the term they call it forest bathing or green bathing, but they have found that basically our brains are naturally drawn to greenery. It finds it soothing. So, even if it's not okay, I'm going to, go out into a forest and, go on a hike for the day, but just even giving yourself some greenery exposure, if you're able to walk around a park, walk around your neighborhood, and mindfully pay attention to the trees, the bushes, the flowers. Sometimes it's even soothing to just draw a forest, draw some greenery, look out your window. It doesn't have to be lengthy or complex. The mental and emotional outlets. So, mindfulness, that is really, really exploding. So many health benefits. And again, mindfulness is so much more than, okay, I'm going to sit down for an hour and I'm going to meditate, just empty my brain. Like, no. Definitely meditation can be one form of mindfulness, but mindfulness is ultimately about just bringing your attention to the present moment. You can do that pretty much anytime, anywhere. So much flexibility to it. I had said earlier that our brain processes information differently, whether we read it, write it, speak it, draw it. So again, with grief, it's being open to different outlets for letting those emotions, when they come up, exist. Now, again, let's be realistic. If you're in the middle of the grocery store, if you are at work, if you're in some sort of setting outside of your comfort zone, yeah, it's natural to, I'm going to try and kind of hold it in or stuff it if I'm having a moment, because it just doesn't feel emotionally safe to be vulnerable. But it's important that if we do have to put something on hold and maybe distract ourselves, that we come back to it, or that we're not constantly putting it on hold or ignoring it. And so there's a lot of ways that you can let that emotion exist. It doesn't always have to be talking. Again, it's going to come down to comfort level. I've had clients say, they'll talk to their loved one about just kind of everyday stuff. They get home, like, oh, okay, babe, so, I went and did this. Or some people I've seen, they'll have morning coffee. They get up in the morning, they start their day. Maybe they have a picture or a little corner that reminds them of their loved one. I know someone who goes over the newspaper with their loved one in the morning. So lots of different ways to do that. You can journal write to them if there's things that you want to share. I really emphasize that, especially when I'm working with kids and teens, as they're hitting all these different milestones, if they had a sports victory, whatever it might be. And it's like, I wish I could, go tell so-and-so about this. You can, write about it, draw them a picture of it, whatever that might be. And drawing, again, it's not just for kids. We're seeing an explosion in the adult coloring books, right? Because again, we need to not limit ourselves because we feel like, oh, it's only for this age group. Coloring can be, some of the benefits to it. It can be a great way to do mindfulness. You're focusing on the colors you're using, the sound of the colored pencil as it hits the paper. The other thing is the brain likes repetitive movement. It just finds it soothing. So that back and forth motion of your hand as it's actually moving, and then as your eyes are seeing your hand back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, it's soothing to the brain. Same thing with jigsaw puzzles, right? Jigsaw puzzles tend to be naturally mindfulness. You're not going to be able to put the pieces together if your mind is off drifting somewhere else thinking about other things. It really grounds you in the present moment. The supports. So, again, feeling like you have people that you can talk to, whether it's family, friends, a formal support group. One of the benefits to technologies nowadays is there are so many more support groups there on, Facebook. There's agencies that have them that are doing Zooms. You can pretty much find a support group for anything nowadays. So that's a big help. I found that coming in and doing maybe some individual formal, grief counseling, yes, is definitely helpful. At the same time, it can be just as powerful to feel like you're able to connect with other people who can relate to what you're going through. So I always say be very open-minded to that. Okay, yeah. And again, looking at those social outlets while keeping in mind a balance. It's okay to want to have quiet time, quiet days, and to not judge yourself. If you decide, hey, I need a day where I just want to Netflix binge, that's not doing nothing. If that is re-energizing you, if it's bringing you some of the downtime, the quiet that you need, that's productive. And I'm going to use that word because that's big in our culture of we're always supposed to be productive, right? So if we're Netflix binging or not doing something on our to-do list, then we're wasting time. No. Okay. Now, if you're Netflix binging day after day after day after day after day, we'll have a different talk. But, keep that in mind. It's all about the balance, finding the middle ground. Okay. Lines of connection. This is always such a fun thing to explore. So again, this person is no longer physically here, but there are ways to continue to feel connected to them regardless of what religious preference someone may have. Okay, so I've got a few ideas here. We already kind of tapped in on talking about still, feeling okay to talk to that person, writing to them. Maybe it's flipping through cards, letters, any sort of memorabilia that you have that reminds you of that person. Listening to their favorite songs, preparing some of their favorite foods and meals. Again, playing a musical instrument or engaging in art that reminds you of them in some way. Wearing their perfume or cologne, an article of clothing. I once had someone state that even the idea of just like wearing that person's socks. No one knows, no one sees it, so it makes it very private and kind of intimate in a way to know that I've got a piece of you with me. Cuddling with pillow, blanket, a shirt, sweatshirt, whatever it might be. Carrying out plans, goals, dreams that you had together, or things that your loved one wanted to do or was in the process of doing. You guys have any other ideas? Anything that anyone's done or that comes to mind?
I was listening to TED Talk.
Yeah.
It's one of my favorites when I just have time. And so they used, the person who was talking about the grief was basically had found a way that is a little bit aligned with this lines of connection. It says that usually people, they want to fix it. As you mentioned, one of the cliches is move on. And so she was telling that I have learned not to move on, but move with. So part of it, just like wearing that articles of clothing, it was one of the items, and writing.
Yeah.
Especially when you write, when you're thinking, and your thoughts are very all over, and basically, but when you write down, you kind of sort them, and kind of you take your time to see your thoughts, and so gather your thoughts, and at that point it gives you a little bit more stability.
Yeah.
And at the same time, you see yourself somehow become historian of the person that no longer is with you. So yes, I have a friend that he lost his 32 years old young son, and he still wears his. He's an old man, but one day I saw him. He has a very cool Louis Vuitton shoes. I said, I haven't seen you wearing stuff like that. And he said, it belongs to my son. So he had that feeling that wearing his shoes or jacket gave him the sense that he's moved with instead of he's move on, because we're not supposed to forget about them. We're not leaving them behind. We are keeping them with us. And so this gives that lines of connection aligned with what you mentioned. Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, for me, doing this is honoring my husband. This is my giving back to the hospital that took care of him for so long, and also honoring him because he would be very happy to see this group and the work that we're doing. And so I think finding something to honor whoever the person is sort of memorializes them and honors them.
Yeah, thank you. And there's towards the end of the year, it's usually November, we do a big presentation on coping with grief around the holidays. And so we really dive into some specific ideas for how to move through the holidays, especially if it's your first holiday season. So, like I said, there's a plethora of ways that you can really look to connect. Don't judge yourself for what you choose. Okay, even if you're like, would someone else find this weird, or who cares, right? It's listen to your gut. Okay, so this top one, we don't forget our loved ones, we bring them with us into the present. It's common to also have this fear of, if I'm feeling happy, if I'm feeling joyful, if I didn't, think about this person 10 times today, does that mean I'm moving on without them? I'm forgetting them? And it's not true, okay? Again, grief comes with moments of joy and peace and relaxation, and by no means does it signify a losing of or forgetting of the loved one. I'm going to say it again. Humans, we are not black and white. And especially with grief, it's possible to experience two opposing emotions at the same time. So just because you're feeling joyful and happy, that doesn't mean that you also miss long for, sorrow your loved one. Okay. I really liked this idea. If you're finding it hard to connect with the present because you're overwhelmed with past memories, or even if you just feel like I need to feel connected and I'm having a hard time doing that, to challenge yourself to identify 5 to 10 ways that your person is still present. Noticing them in objects, traditions, your child's laughter, shared values, the way you continue to talk to them, the way you talk about them. Again, just kind of, and again, it's kind of a nice mindfulness activity, just kind of scan the room and notice what are things that remind you of them. Is it, a color in a painting? Is it a can of green beans? I mean, again, it can be really simple things. Okay. So, a little snapshot on special days, whether it's, again, holidays, anniversaries, birthdays, whatever it might be. When we have those, I say, big days, this is some food for thought. So it's, again, there's this constant balance of planning, but also being very open and accepting to completely wiping your plan clean. Because the way you feel day of, or even as you move throughout that day, could be totally different from how you thought you would feel. A lot of times I hear the anticipation of a significant date is more challenging than the date itself.
That's true.
So again, if you want to treat it like any other day, that's okay too. That's okay to say, I'm going to take a pass or a skip this year. Give yourself that leeway. Follow your gut, what's right. Just because maybe you don't carry out a certain tradition one year doesn't mean that it's gone forever. You can pick it up, tweak it, modify it the next year. But when you do, think about what are some of the traditions that are meaningful for you that you want to keep. What are things that you're interested in changing or discontinuing? Who is a good support for you during this time? I always say it's always such a disappointment when you're like, like I'm stressed or I'm sad, and you go talk to someone to vent. And again, it's well-intended, but maybe you just needed someone to listen and validate, and they jumped into problem solving. And so you walk away from that conversation still feeling just aggravated and tense and stressed out. So be mindful when you look at your support system of what each person's strengths are. When I talk to my kids, I always tell them, as an example, you're not going to go to your science teacher for help on an English paper. So kind of same thing, who is someone who is a good listener? Who is someone who's a good problem solver? And maybe it's even more specific. Who's a good problem solver when it comes to family stuff? Maybe a good problem solver with work stuff, whatever it might be. So be mindful of that when you're reaching out for support. How can you honor the memory of your loved one? What's your plan and your plan B if needed? Like I said, it's a good idea to do some element of planning so that way when the day comes, if there's something that's important to you to do, you can help to make sure that happens. But it's also okay where maybe you wake up that morning or maybe as the day's gone on and you're like, ooh, this isn't feeling right, or this is feeling like enough, or this is feeling like too much. That's okay. Don't box yourself in. Okay. Okay. So, again, people in general kind of tend to tiptoe because they don't know. They're like, again, well-intended. I don't want to bring this person up because I don't want to make you sad, or maybe you don't want to talk about it. So a lot of times people are looking to you to kind of set the tone. So it can be really helpful and healthy for you to be able to, to put it out there. Like, yeah, like I do love talking about him. Or, I would like to do this. Once you initiate, they normally kind of fall into place. Boundaries is something that most people don't think of when you think of grief. But boundaries are really, really important. It's very easy and common, I find, for people to be like, well, I probably should do this, or I could, or, I don't really want to do this, but, they're thinking about what maybe their loved ones in the family would want. So they're like, okay, so we'll do it. And so there tends to be this ignoring or neglect of what feels right to you. So again, be mindful of the boundaries that you need to set for yourself. Like, I'm going to wipe my to-do list for today and be okay with it because I'm just not in the mood for it. I don't have the energy for it. And also to be okay with setting boundaries with events with other people. It's okay to say no, or I want to pass this time. Don't get caught up in I'm doing things because it's what I feel like other people expect or what other people are wanting to do. And again, this bottom one is kind of hitting on what I was mentioning of that balance of, yes, we don't want to completely isolate ourselves, but also don't feel like you have to suddenly turn into, social butterfly. Making sure you're finding a balance of connecting with others because that is a very integral part of the human experience. I once went to a presentation, and man, this stuck with me, blew me away. And with medical staff in the room, you guys are probably going to know more about this, and even I do with the specifics, but he had stated that the part of the brain that lights up when we experience physical pain is the same part of the brain that lights up when we feel isolation or rejection. It's like, wow, that is powerful. Wow. It just really goes to show we are wired for human connection in order to thrive. So, keeping that in mind. Okay. And that takes us there. Do you guys have any questions, any thoughts, any experiences you want to share?
I have one.
Yeah.
My husband and I always watch all the Giants games. And so I'm always happy when the baseball season starts.
Yeah.
And I try to watch as many of them as possible. And I'm always thinking about how he would react. And I'm beginning to react just like he did. When they're winning or when they're losing or when they were sending somebody away that they shouldn't have.
Uh-huh.
I'm still aggravated about that, and he would be too. But it makes me smile.
Yeah.
And so it always feels good. Yeah.
Yeah. I've got a similar experience. I was really close to my grandma, and I don't know why, but in her 90s, she died when she was 96, but in her 90s, she really got into the Warriors. Loved watching the Warriors games, loved Steph Curry. She'd always stand during the fourth quarter, and she had this theory that whoever reaches 100 points first usually wins the game. So in my house, when we're watching Warrior games, as soon as the Warriors hit 100, my kids, my husband, we all shout, "Grandma roll!" And it's just a little thing that just helps us to, lighten our heart and make us feel connected. Yeah. So
yes, father-daughter survivor night.
Yes.
Every once in a while, yep.
Uh-huh.
Even when he was in ICU, they let me stay during that time because they were generally closed
Okay.
to allowing visitors at that time. They closed the door and let us stay.
Oh, I love that. Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know if anyone else has ever experienced this, and it's kind of a long, convoluted story, but my family and I have had since my husband passed away, since the day after he passed away, a very special relationship with a bluebird.
Oh,
He visits us all the time. We've had numerous encounters. And his song that he played over and over again was Somewhere Over the Rainbow, where bluebirds fly.
yeah.
So
Thank you for
very,
sharing.
very powerful. And it
Yeah.
continued.
Yeah, some people feel like they get messages or signs from their loved one, and you know what? Whether someone else feels it or believes it, again, who cares?
It's
If
as long
it's
as we
connected
do.
for you,
Yeah, it doesn't matter.
yeah, yeah,
My bedside clock radio, the light was out, for the longest time, so I could never see really what time it was. And then after my dad passed, came home, the next morning it was flashing. But thanks, Dad, I know you're trying to work on it. And he loved to tinker with things, so that would have been him doing it.
yeah.
It doesn't matter if anybody else believes it.
Yeah.
But some things are just, I don't believe particularly in coincidence, but some things are just too important to ignore.
Yeah, it's whatever warms your heart. Yeah. Well, thank you so much, guys, for coming today. So we'll be back in about 2 months, and that will be our topic in July. So I put out some flyers that have the rest of the topics for the year. And again, if you guys have any questions about our services, whether it's our hospice service, palliative, our counseling services, whatever it might be, feel free to reach out, give us a call. We'd love to help
Can
you.
you give us your direct email contact?
Yeah.